Let's look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah!
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions video, and welcome back to part 2 of the Detroit Lions 2023 mock offseason. Now, yesterday we talked a lot about the pre-planning stages of free agency, right? We talked about how players could get cut, cap casualties could be in effect, and different players that may be removed from the roster, but at the end of the day, that cap space that was saved or the cap that was cleared up could be used in order to re-sign some of the players we'll talk about today and some of the players that we will talk about tomorrow. So, with $40 million in the bank and $40 million to re-sign your unrestricted free agents as well as your draft class and your free agency class, how should the Detroit Lions approach unrestricted free agents, and how should the Lions approach free agency in general? Well, that is what we are going to be talking about today, specifically focusing on the players that need to be re-signed by the Detroit Lions before getting into the active free agency market tomorrow. So, with that being said, let's start off with the most important free agent that we have, that being Jamal Williams. Now, I think Jamal Williams was a great signing at the time that it was made 2 years ago, and I think it should be a very similar contract this time around. As far as length, 2 years seems very appropriate for Jamal Williams. That would put him right at his age 29 season, going into his age 30 season, where running backs typically and physically start to fall off. Now, Jamal Williams is a player that is a heart and soul piece of this Detroit Lions roster, as he has been one of the emotional and one of the physical leaders of this team since entering the building 2 years ago. Last year, he had his first 1,000-yard rushing season, as well as breaking the franchise record for rushing touchdowns in a season that was held by Barry Sanders for decades. Now, Jamal Williams, I think, deserves a very significant pay raise this year, as where last time he signed 2 years, $6 million. I think the Lions will sign him 2 years, $10 million to be a backup running back, and where $5 million might seem a little bit expensive for a second stringer, Jamal Williams gets a lot of carries for this team as a very important piece both on and off the field with his play and his leadership. And if we've learned anything from the Brad Holmes regime, it's that if you prove your worth, if you prove you belong on the Detroit Lions, they are going to take care of you. And Jamal Williams, I think, is the most deserving player of this list to get a contract. I think he will get some of the biggest money from this unrestricted free agency class, and I think he deserves anything that he could ask for. So I think 2 years, $10 million, really upping his yearly salary and cap hit from about $2.5 to $5 million, getting about double what he got last time around. I think he has certainly earned a contract, and he has certainly earned the opportunity to stay here in Detroit. And moving down to the defensive side of the ball, I think that John Cominsky should be the #1 priority for defensive free agency. John Cominsky was a waiver wire pickup this past offseason from the Atlanta Falcons, where they weren't really going to use him. They were getting rid of him. They didn't feel like he was going to be beneficial to their roster. And Brad Holmes said, that's a guy with a high motor. That's a guy that works very hard. That's a guy that could plug into my system and be very efficient very quickly. So they used their priority waiver wire on him, and they ended up getting John Cominsky for a very discounted price. Now, John Cominsky came in and had 4 sacks on the season while being a huge impact player for this defense. The stats really don't show the impact that John Cominsky had on the team, but if you look at the games that John Cominsky played in versus the games John Cominsky missed, there is a very clear and evident gap between where the Lions are with him and where the Lions are without him. The Lions, just for a reference, did not win a game without John Cominsky, and when John Cominsky was in, the Lions went 9-3, with the only losses coming to Philadelphia, the 1 seed in the NFC, the Buffalo Bills, as well as the Carolina Panthers, all of which were very hard-fought games, and 2 of which the Lions had an opportunity to win at the very end. John Cominsky, I think, is a key piece of this defense right now. Even if he's not the biggest name and not getting the biggest contract, I would feel very comfortable signing John Cominsky to a 3-year, $7 million contract Not a ton of money, not a ton of cap, but something that is very respectable for a player of his caliber, and something that I think he'd be more than willing to sign for a long-term success, long-term contracts, as well as the ability to stay in Detroit, getting a significant pay raise for what he did last year for Detroit. Now, I think a similar thing could be said for Isaiah Buggs, and I don't think Isaiah Buggs is necessarily a long-term piece like John Kaminsky, but I think that he's certainly earned a re-signing of his own. I think 1 year, $2.5 million for Isaiah Buggs is more than sufficient for the work that he put in. He was a very good run stopper for the Detroit Lions, as well as showing flashes in the pass rush and being very good at that side of the ball as well. He was a great player for the Detroit Lions on the interior of that defensive line, lined up next to Aleem McNeil, and that duo really did a good job of stopping the run in a majority of games, of course, with the one exception of Carolina, but for a large majority of the back half of the season, those two were doing a really good job of stopping opposing running backs, including guys like Saquon Barkley, Dalvin Cook, Aaron Jones, as well as many other top running backs in the NFL that had career low days or had season low days versus the Detroit Lions in the second half of the season. I think bringing back a guy like Isaiah Buggs, whether it be to start or even as a backup slash rotational piece, would be very beneficial to the Lions, as it's not super expensive. You have a guy that already knows the system, a guy that played well in the system a year ago, and somebody that wants to stay in Detroit. Sticking on the defensive side of the ball, I think Alex Anzalone comes back around one more time and turns into another captain. Alex Anzalone has been an emotional leader for this defense since day one. He was one of the first signings that Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell made, as he followed Dan Campbell from the New Orleans Saints over to the Detroit Lions, and he has been absolutely phenomenal for the Detroit Lions. Yes, he's missed a few tackles. Yes, he hasn't been perfect, but he has been prolific, he has been efficient, he has been a leader, and he has been a very key piece to the Detroit Lions' defensive success late in the 2022 season. Now, I don't think he deserves a long-term contract, or at least I don't think the Lions are going to sign him to a long-term contract, because I think linebacker is going to be in the cards in free agency as well as potentially in the draft. But I think bringing back your captain, I think bringing back the leader of your defense yet again on a 1 year, $2.5 million deal is something Alex Anzalone would not only benefit from, as he would get a significant pay bump from what he got last offseason, but as well as bringing back somebody that would very much benefit the Detroit Lions from a leadership standpoint, as well as being able to plug and play immediately for the Detroit Lions if free agency doesn't go the way that you expect. Now, Josh Woods is another linebacker that I would expect the Detroit Lions to re-sign. Somebody that is very much undervalued on the Detroit Lions as a special teams captain, but somebody that on the special teams is so incredibly crucial. I think bringing him back for a 1 year, $1 million deal is more than sufficient for what he brings to the football team. And he's not a great defensive player, right? He doesn't really plug in and play a lot of defensive snaps, but he is such a valuable piece on special teams that keeping guys like that, keeping guys with that energy and just the fire that Josh Woods brings every single time he goes out to cover a kick, every time he goes out to cover a punt, every time he goes out on special teams, he's looking to make plays. He flies to the returner and makes a lot of good plays on defense. So I think bringing him back for the special teams would be crucial for the Lions. Now, the next two players I want to talk about are two players that are very similarly linked for reasons why they should return, and that would be Amani Oruwariye and Will Harris. Neither one had a great season in 2022. Amani Oruwariye had a very big fall off from his 2021 campaign where he had 6 interceptions, and Will Harris has never really been the biggest playmaker for the Detroit defense. However, with that being the case, I really don't see the market being all that large for the Detroit Lions cornerback duo, and bringing back a cornerback duo in Amani Oruwariye, who has shown the ability to turn the football over multiple times in a season, as well as bringing back a player in Will Harris who to his credit, has shown the ability to improve significantly over the last couple of years under Aaron Glenn, I think would be beneficial. Neither one really has a market. I think you could bring back Amani Oruwariye for 1 year, $2 million, and bring back Will Harris for 1 year, $1 million. Worst case scenario, they are your cornerbacks 4 and 5, and they are players that know the system, players that know the defense, know the coaching staff, and have starting experience and starting reps against NFL defenses. I don't think they should be returned as starters. I don't think they should be returned as potentially guys that will be your cornerbacks 1 and 2. But as far as depth purposes, if they have no market and they come back at a value like $2 or $1 million in a season, I think that is more than acceptable to bring back guys that you've groomed, guys that you've developed, and guys that have starting reps and proven success at some level at the NFL. And then the last player I want to talk about is Brock Wright. I think Brock Wright very much proved himself this season. He was a really good player and stepped up in that tight end 1 position when the Lions really needed somebody. He was an undrafted free agent 2 years ago and really just has exceeded all expectations at the tight end position. Not only do I think Brock Wright could go into next season being tight end 1, I think he could go into next season and be a featured part of this offense, playing a majority of downs at the tight end position with his ability to block as well as receive. I think bringing back Brock Wright for 2 years, $2 million, giving him a big pay bump, giving him a little bit of security over the next 2 years, and giving him the opportunity to start at the tight end position without having that handicap of, oh, well, we're paying him this much money, he has to be the starter, would be very beneficial to the Detroit Lions. Now, with that being said, that is all the players I think the Lions should re-sign this offseason, right? And that, of course, leaves 2 giant holes. Where's DeShon Elliott, and where's DJ Chark going? I think both players are going to have a very large market. DeShon Elliott is coming off of a Verge Pro Bowl season where he was one of the best players on the Detroit Lions defense. And even though it is a fairly deep safety class, I do think DeShon Elliott is going to command $7 to $8 million a season. And right now, I just don't think the Lions are in a position to pay that. I think the Lions have put big money into Tracy Walker. They've put big picks into Kirby Joseph and Ifeatu Melifonwu, and they have played relatively well. Tracy Walker is a very good player. Of course, Kirby Joseph, I think, should be a Pro Bowler this year. And Iffy has even shown quite a few flashes over his first 2 years, despite being inconsistent and not always the most readily available player. If DeShon Elliott wants to come back for a value, if DeShon Elliott would re-sign for something at about 6 or even in that low $7 million range a year for 2 years, I would not be opposed to it, but I think the market for him is going to be relatively large, and I think the Lions have the draft capital to go out and replace him in the draft if he refuses to return. Same thing kind of goes with DJ Chark. The wide receiver market is extremely depleted this year in free agency, as DJ Chark very well could be the #1 option in free agency. I think that he's going to get probably somewhere between $12 to $15 million a season. And for the Detroit Lions, who have put draft assets and have put a lot of cap into their wide receiver position, I really don't see DJ Chark returning for anything over $10 million, right? The Lions have Jameson Williams. They have Amon-Ra St. Brown. They have Josh Reynolds. They have Khalif Raymond. They have Quintez Cephas even, who's made some big plays in the past. And they have picks, again, if they want to go out and get a decent wide receiver in the 2nd or 3rd day of the NFL draft. I just don't think bringing in a wide receiver who, again, was very good for the Detroit Lions. DJ Chark was a great player, but I think you can go out and replace that production with Jameson Williams' development as well as a day 3 or even a day 2 pick and really go out and use that money wiser elsewhere. So, with that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. A very big unrestricted free agency class for the Detroit Lions, but one that shouldn't be too expensive, right? A free agency class that returns Jamal Williams, John Kaminsky, Isaiah Buggs, Alex Anzalone, Josh Woods, Evan Brown, Amani Oruwariye, Will Harris, as well as Brock Wright, I think is pretty good as far as a returning class. It returns a lot of the core producers from a season ago while letting some of the other less productive players walk out the door. And the 2 big names that you might expect to be returning are both players I think are replaceable in the defense and the offense, and players that, while very valuable and why I would appreciate them returning and I would like to see them suit up in Detroit yet again, I just don't think are the most realistic options for how the Detroit Lions are going to build this roster. With all that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. Let me know down in the comments below, what do you think about this free agency class? If this were the players to return, if these were the players to return, how would you feel about it? Would you want to see DJ Chark return even if it was at a little bit of an extra cost? Would you want to see DeShon Elliott return even though we're paying Tracy Walker pretty big money at the safety position? I'm very curious what you guys think. But with all that being said, that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you all so much for watching. Until next time, and as always, go Lions.